why don't we jump in right away? I'll give you a little background first, and Keith will give you a demo. I'm Andy Bloom. Phil Collins and Keith Westman work with me. I'm a businessman, 7-8 years ago, I saw that technology and software and mobility, at least I thought, could have a dramatic impact on education, at least from what I had seen. And so I started looking into what was happening in the classroom with software and technology. And I met two teachers who had just gotten iPads in the classrooms. The iPads had just come out. They were one-to-one. And I started talking to them, and they had all sorts of issues with using the software, with the iPads or lack of software. And the other thing that I found out was that there was no equivalent of what I would call health records for students. And that is a father of 3 now. There was no repository of everything that I would want to know about my kid from when they entered school and when they left school. And so that was the impetus of us building Otus. And as it relates to all these conversations over the last 2 days, which have been great, is that we have access to students of every age. We have access to parents, we have access to teachers, administrators, and we have lots of data. And I think that there's a lot of things that you all can come up with, whether it's games, whatnot, to focus on the big 5 or a broader set, and we can start to attribute the big 5 to different characteristics, whether it's grades or behaviors, or to all the demographics of a kid, to absences. I mean, literally, we can track just about anything in the classroom. And I think what's really interesting is that since you can have access to the kids in some form, to really quick little questions to either teachers or parents or students that happen regularly and that are very simple and easily asked and answered, I think would provide consistent feedback that hopefully solves some of the issues that have coming up with your research, in that you'll have time and in theory accuracy, as long as necessarily the kids aren't talking to each other and cheating or whatever the case may be. But so that's what Otus is all about.
All right, well, thanks, Andy. So I'm not a scientist. Similar to before, where the statement was made there's going to be no equations. There's not even going to be any research in my presentation. So we're a software company, okay? We are not researchers. We're not scientists. And we're trying to bridge the gap between conversations that happen here and average teachers that are doing the work that we hope they're doing in classrooms every single day. And if we believe that if we can connect with researchers, product designers, which is what we are, and practitioners, actual people who are teaching and who likely did not go to University of Chicago, did not go to Stanford, did not go to MIT. If we can make data meaningful, then we can actually see some serious change in K-12. So we live in the K-12 space, okay? And let me give you a common scenario that happens in classrooms all throughout the country. Teachers are asked to look at data and do something differently to their kids with it, okay? And this is just a common scenario of Mrs. Johnson, who's going to walk into her class Monday morning and teach 2nd grade. These are all of the different sources of data and stuff that she knows about her kids. And she's supposed to assemble all of these data points into one picture and then do something differently with kids while there's 60 people staring at them. One kid's pulling the fire alarm and another kid just walked in with a terrible haircut. It straight up doesn't happen. So what we're trying to do is, in some cases, replace some of these logos that you see, and then in other cases incorporate the data into one platform. So how did it get like this? It got like this because school boards across the country started going one-to-one. All their kids have a device. And so they spent a lot of money. And they're like, let's make these things meaningful. Teachers go out and just use them. We don't, just do something with them. So all these companies pop up to do something with them. But that's caused chaos because every classroom is different. And if you're for my son, who's just chaotic because he has my genes, and he has 8 teachers who use 8 different things, he has 64 different, it's crazy.
And that's why you didn't put out school over there, right?
What's that?
Out school.
We'll talk about alt school if you want. So what we knew is when we're building this unified thing, we're not scientists. We probably have access to a lot of cool information, but we don't know what to do with it. So that's where Professor Heckman and his team come in. So we join forces to say there's probably something here, and how cool would it be for this data to be used to give teachers interventions, like on the fly, so that when we think about personalized learning, it's really not like, hey, Keith loves music, so he's going to learn about whales by only music, like personalizing content. We're not really about, but personalizing instructional strategies or interventions so that the kids are learning in the way that best meets their needs is really something that is exciting. But since we don't know how to make this data really tell us anything, hence why we're here. And hence why we're talking to all of you, because you may have some ideas for some of the things that you've mentioned and how this could all play a role. So let me show you the software. And I'm going to show you how a teacher would use it. This is Mr. Bueller, okay? So let me just show you a couple things that teachers can do. Now, we do care about UI, user interface, because if it's not friendly and easy for the teacher to use, they won't use it. And if they don't use it, their kids won't use it. If no one uses it, then there's nothing to look at, no data to look at. So this is a teacher, okay? A couple things they can do. The kids come into class, and they notice that there's a couple kids being goofballs. Well, they can document an observed behavior. And so I went to National Louis University, and I had a low ACT. But I've been sitting here for 2 days, and I know that what is probably in your head is observed behaviors. That's already a problem. Of course it is. But we're a for-profit company, and what we're trying to do is solve problems that exist in schools. One of the logos that I showed up there is a product that millions of teachers use to document behavior. So, and now what we're saying to them is continue documenting behavior, but we're going to start putting it within context. And what we found is teachers really don't care about the company they use, they care about the problem they're solving. So this replaces one of those. Now, would it be cool, like we heard from a gentleman from MIT, to have like devices that the kids could wear? Of course. I don't know any school district that's going to let that happen. And we serve K-12 school systems. Now, if we think about where the future is, are they going to be open to that? Hopefully so, and that'd be really cool, because then we don't have to have observed behavior. But nonetheless, we have a spot for it.
One of the interesting things here is, as far as standardization, we don't provide a template today of where schools should start with those behaviors. So that's an area where you all could have real input into saying, what are the things that teachers, simple things, not necessarily the big five, that they're not going to understand, that they can easily track.
That's a good point. So this
is obviously going to change probably by grade.
But the point is every organization can determine what they care about. Now the likelihood that as a former middle school principal in the suburbs of Chicago, I'm going to tell parents that we're tracking their kids' neuroticism. No, not going to do that. But there may be user-friendly terms that track the same thing that would not completely fill the boardroom at the next board meeting. Yeah. Okay. Now, another thing teachers can do, another point of data, is they can assemble groups of kids. So it could be like we want to look at kids we want to just mark them if they're their first year in the district. One of a massive challenge that schools have is when they go to look at how their school districts are doing, an easy excuse for administrators is to say, well, that's brought down by all the kids. We have a transient district and we're always taking in other people's kids. So we want to give them a way to exclude those kids and look at some of the similar data. But this could be cheerleaders, could be Jägermeister drinkers, could be whatever they want, okay? So we're creating the idea of creating groups. Other things we can do, just simple things like take attendance, because that's going to tell you something. Another thing that teachers can do is document when kids are participating. So if they're having a lecture or something and they want to randomly call on kids, this can literally just timestamp and document that a kid was called on, okay? And then the final piece I'll share with you in this section is how we can communicate with family members and students outside of school. So we can send them text messages or email messages. Again, it's tracking when it was sent and to whom, okay? So this all begins to build this one system that currently, in order to do what I just did, currently, without Otus, teachers will have 4 or 5 different tools, but no standardization across the district, which is what we're trying to do. So now what, okay? So now, here's what a teacher can start to do with data. So again, we don't do anything with data other than put it in charts that can be looked at. So we were documenting behaviors, and the teacher wants to see how her kids are doing over the past month, okay? So here's where they can start to manipulate, or at least connect what they know, even the data, whether it's reliable or not, the data they've collected with instruction. They can say, well, I have my biggest challenge here is kids are unprepared. Okay, well, who are these nudniks? All right, so I'm going to say they're unprepared. I taught 3rd grade, by the way. And I didn't use the word nudnik when I was talking with those kids. And I'm going to put them in this group, okay? So now they're going to say, well, PBS just came out with this awesome content that I saw. And I want to make sure that these kids get that content. So we have tools in here that would allow a teacher to assemble a bunch of learning activities, a YouTube video, a Google Doc, or it doesn't matter what it is, and ultimately share that with just the right kids. So now we're able to say, the teacher's able to say, based on our kids who are unprepared, this is the right resource for them. So another thing where I think Otus could go is where Otus is figuring that out for the teacher, okay? But right now, the business problem we're solving for school systems is that the chaos, we just need to organize. So let's talk about, final thing I want to share with you, or there's 2 more things I want to share with you. One is just general types of assessments that can be given to students through Otus. So there's a big movement right now to give these things called common assessments. So end of course assessments, like by the month, to show growth over time. And so what we can do is give different types of items. We have this massive library of 65 item types that teachers can choose from. We can also do rubric-based assessments, so it's like observing a video or observing a paper, reading a paper and commenting on it. But you can see, like, they're interactive and, ideally collecting right or wrong answers. So it's a really powerful kind of formative or summative assessment engine. And then we have this one cool item type that might be interesting, which is the ability to draw on an image, so in this case, like circle something, and then it will record that. So like the use case in a school system is like a math teacher who's watching someone solve a math problem. They can see where the kid falls apart and replay it. Okay, so we have just formative, summative assessment data, we have behavioral data, we have attendance data, we have demographic data, grouping data. Well, then the other data that bombards K-12 educators is all these third-party assessments. So some of these things may look familiar to you. Well, right now, teachers have to log in here, log in there to see how kids are doing, assemble that story on their own. They're not going to be able to do it. So we're just trying to bring it together. We're not telling them anything about what's happening. We're just showing it to them. So, they're in one system. It's relatively efficient for them to go and look at stuff, and we're able to visualize it. Now, the cool thing is we keep these kids for as long as that school district is a client of ours. So the teacher who has the kid in the fall of 2017 is able to dip back into historic stuff. And so that's kind of just visualizing our ability to show over time how this data can all come together. So where we would, I think the comment earlier was, PBS is able to gather all this assessment data. Well, we would love to visualize that here because it puts it within context of the other stuff that they have. But again, all we're trying to do is provide the tools to unify all of this stuff that's coming at teachers in one place so it can feed off one another. Questions?
So, it's great to have all those information together for the teachers to access. So what really motivates the teacher to do so, even to access information? Is there other performance?
Well, so that's the key, and I think I think there's a question at dinner when we were having the conversation, do teachers even want the data? Yeah, so that's why UX and knowing what one-off solutions are really popular is so important for us, because it may be that the hook that's going to get someone into Otus is the ability to create a copy of a Google Doc for her 30 students and then change ownership. So like after you submit it, it's me and you can't touch it. So that might be the hook to get them in. And then once they're in, our job as a company is to increase their usage of it. But where we go is we sell to the school district. And we tell them you mandate how it's going to be used. And then when it's mandated, it's...
So the school districts are motivated because...
School districts motivated because the administrators now, stuff doesn't stop at the classroom level, okay? So now the administrator comes in and says, I have all of this, my teachers are doing all this stuff. I want to create these queries where I'm going to look at 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade behavior. But it's stuff that's happening every day. They're building these queries, maybe comparing assessment data to behavior data. They're able to manipulate it across the entire district. But the district can also say, I just want to look at the kids that drink Jägermeister. They can do the same grouping with teachers. So I want to look at how the kids behave in my first-year teachers versus my veteran teachers. So it allows you to see all this stuff. And again, we're not scientists or researchers. We're just trying to assemble this so that something can be done with it ultimately.
So there is the school district's performance determined by the insights. For example, because we worked with the university, right?
Yeah.
So they care about this deeply. Their funding could be suspended if they can't articulate it.
You're totally right. Where that really only comes into play for us is charter schools. So charter schools will like this because they do have to justify their existence, whereas the public schools have to justify their existence as long as the superintendent isn't caught doing something. Right. They're getting funding.
For teachers to answer the point on what's their motivation is just, pain aversion. If you're getting bombarded by all these software things, it's click one, and you have to piece them all together.
Yep.
It's very painful.
But I guess I didn't quite understand is if they don't do this one, how does it hurt their job? I guess that's the ultimate. I can be very lazy, right? I don't do it anyways. So what's going to happen to me if I don't even look at it? That's the simplest. I don't even click on anything.
I think you can answer better from a compliance perspective, maybe nothing, but from a make my life easier perspective, quite a bit.
Right. So you were talking about painkiller versus the vitamins. So I want to say, make sure this is a painkiller for the teachers.
For sure.
Right.
So we like to...
But it can be a vitamin for others at the same time, because you will have teachers who are the opposite. Like, man, I love that I can actually put some meaning to what I'm doing.
We like to call it a productivity tool for the teachers to make their lives easier.
So if they have to do it, productivity makes sense. If they don't have to do it.
No, then it becomes another thing.
Exactly, right. So if it seems like they have
Yeah.
to do it.
Mm-hmm.
But in Illinois, why don't you talk about student growth?
Well, so, I think the term that the folks from ETS were using is these drop-in assessments. I thought of PARC. PARC is the statewide test that actually Illinois just dropped. it's this point in time thing. You're carving out 5 days of instructional time. You take the test. And what ESSA, which is the Every Student Succeeds Act, has basically said to school districts is, instead of this point in time, hey, dropping the thermometer in, okay, you guys are good, you guys bad, it's more frequent, shorter period of time measures of student performance, so you can see growth over time, so the teacher can get those results right away and do something with it tomorrow, instead of me doing something with my kids in November based on the temperature that was taken last March.
Well, you hear all the time that teachers want to demonstrate growth. Don't judge me based on a single test. Judge me based on the students in my classroom over time. I had all the knuckleheads this year, and they've done great.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of that. Obviously, this can be used to analyze how teachers are performing. We never tell the teachers that. They obviously know, and none of this we don't want the administrators to use this to hire and fire per se, because then the teachers would never use it.
Yeah.
But you certainly can use this to recommend professional development, which is on the roadmap. We haven't done yet, but to make the teachers better teachers. I mean, that's ultimately a goal.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't have that take. I mean, maybe that's another very interesting one. But I mean, here you have the possibility of looking at kids and looking them within the classroom, as well as their parents, as well as their teachers.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah.
So
that's right.
I mean,
And
I
over
think,
time.
and over time.
Yeah.
Now,
The growth curve.
I think that here there is, I don't know, I mean, probably a 20-year research work not for one individual, but for many people. So, for example, one could think of interventions, randomized interventions across classrooms, say, changing the curriculum, and how that affects the performance of the kids,
Right,
how that affects the performance of the teachers,
for sure.
and how that affects many different dimensions of performance, right? Not just the GPA, but
Right.
attendance and all of that. One could also think of interventions that are affecting the parents,
Right.
I mean, pieces of information that are reaching the parents, of any sort, right? I mean, say, informing them on the, say, university opportunities that their kids might have, or informing them on the money that different types of universities
Right.
can give
Right.
to their kids, right?
Right.
I mean, the returns to education, for example. So the number of potential interventions that you can have is enormous, right? And I think that all of this could be, in principle, extremely useful, both to the single teacher as well as to the single
More
researcher.
systemically, right,
But it could
right.
be extremely important for the specific
Yeah.
local educational authority.
For program evaluation of adopting a new curriculum, and you
Yeah.
have these kids piloting it, and then comparing that,
Exactly.
just other areas. You're not just looking at the performance on that math.
Yeah.
You're looking at just within context of all this other stuff. What's the difference?
So I mean, but is this something that you are planning to do? I mean, is it something on the table with?
Well, the beauty of what we're doing at the
Gene?
University of Chicago is everything's on the table, because we just started.
Well, and there's a hope for some pilots, right? We have
Yep.
different systems that will
So
be
key
more or
is,
less cooperative.
we've asked a bunch of schools that obviously are interested. The idea would ultimately, talk to all the schools, and depending on what we're asking of them, if they're very simple questions that we could track behaviors, I think you could get a lot of the schools to say, yeah, we'll agree to do that.
Well, there's the doing research with a university for public sector schools is like a double-edged sword. It's like it can look good, and it also can be like, well, now you're using my kids' data to do something, and that just can sometimes be scary.
It's evaluation.
Right. But there are schools who are excited to do this.
Well, and in principle, you could go even beyond and, say, putting the stuff together with what we've seen this morning.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
So you could also think of potential interventions where, say, PBS
Yep.
products
Or even like
are
grouping
randomly
students.
assigned to specific
Yep.
schools.
Yep.
So that could be again something else that you can have.
Yep.
On the,
So one thing that
Are these things that you are planning to have?
I think that this is exactly.
Can we access to these certain things?
Well,
and do
I-
research to these certain, I mean, it's extremely
I
exciting.
mean, I want to see you guys arm wrestle.
Yeah.
So one of the things that keep it in show, we try to get everything tied to the Common Core, just as a language to compare across, different schools and states.
That's right. I mean, the big thing is standardization of the data collection. That's where our work will start,
Yeah.
because everyone's looking at something different, and so we have to get some sort of common thing to look at.
In terms of the idea of partnerships with other organizations like a PBS Kids or other content providers who are generating data on kids, we want to have those conversations. We want to talk about that because the more data a district has within the system, the more it gives them a complete picture of student performance and what's happening, both in the social emotional realm, in various academic performance realms, and it becomes a very rich piece, even from just inside a district, let alone from a research perspective. So I spent a lot of years as a central office administrator. That's the kind of question that I was often asked at the board table by our board members, say, well, how are our students performing? I had to put all this stuff together myself. So now, if I can generate that from within the system and bring in some of those social emotional components, we were talking earlier with Brenton, he was talking about the ability to gather that data, some of that data in smaller pieces over time. Well, we can do that within the system. So we have that ability to kind of do that and give that full picture. And I think there's a lot of potential here for partnerships on multiple levels.
Have you dealt with a sticky wicket of parents and consent to share the information? I assume you don't need to do that with teachers, but if you're going to do any partnering.
Yeah, so we anonymize the data that we share when we do share it.
So I guess
And yeah, go ahead.
the question is that even okay? So do you still need, I think as a researcher, I still am going to have to go to my RAB and say, and they're going to tell me you need to consent the parent.
Right.
Because you just can't work with kids without doing it. So, you can do secondary data analysis if you guys collect it, and it's archived someplace, and then you get approval. That's a way around it, but for the most part, that's just something you're going to have to figure out.
We'll figure that out.
And even if there are ways.
I'll call some of my old high school
I would
friends.
highly advise you against that. Have you followed the Bloom story? Similar story, trying to.
I'm sorry, In Bloom?
Oh,
In Bloom?
Yes, we know In Bloom.
Okay.
So In Bloom was Bill Gates' attempt to do this. It was very top down. This
They didn't
is
engage parents at all, ever.
no, never engage parents. I've seen the U.S. Everything is about local schools. Bill Gates. Everyone was scared of Bill Gates. He said, "Send me all your data, and I'll look at it." And it blew up. But he never had the classroom data. He never had the real granular data that we're collecting on
The difference
a daily
is
basis.
it was going to Bill Gates, and then a report was coming back to the district, and that was scary. Whereas what we're doing is it's just going to the superintendent and then do with it what
And
you
it's
need
for
to
the
do.
district to do what they want.
Well, they're collecting the data anyway right now.
And even what's more scary, through apps that they don't even know what the teachers are using.
Yeah.
They're signing up. Yeah, here, Keith Westman. Here's.
The other issue I'll throw out is not just ease for the teacher, but having worked with some school districts, the data quality is incredibly low because when they're trying to bring those spreadsheets together, hundreds, thousands of rows fall out because they don't have a unique identifier. And so
Right, that's-
because they've cobbled it together from all over. So the opportunity to have a single platform that's easy, integrated, quality data, you can elevate the level of discourse. Right now they're spending time like shoveling to get the data. Well, you could already have the ditch dug and you could be building something, which is a conversation with insight around student achievement. So I think it's really an opportunity to take it to the next level.
So one of the things I know someone was doing some research on groups and how do you create the best groups of kids and matching them with the right teachers. That's obviously a whole nother avenue that we'd like to go to, how to maximize learning and matching the right characteristics
interactions,
of
Right.
so.
Yeah, like knowing if a kid is scoring well because maybe they're hanging out with new friends.
Absolutely.
So, would be cool. Yeah. Or if the bad friends I had in middle school were actually bad.
So are you going to feed back to the teachers too, in terms of the information that is there going to be a package? So
That's the idea. Is that where we want to start is is immediate feedback to teachers about what's happening. Have it start there before we get into the
I'm thinking simple things like you have a relationship with them. So I immediately think of my experiences where a whole class can be poisoned by 2 students or 1 student. Right? And
Yeah.
you know, sometimes teachers have that experience. It's a bad year, you know, especially in elementary school.
Yeah.
Or something. So if you have this relationship with them and say, look, you guys want to know what effect does that have, especially if there's this mandate to come and assess the performance of the kids and they're using that to
Yep.
evaluate teachers.
Yeah.
You could give them information that they could use to understand their process.
Yep.
I mean,
Yeah, no, I love it.
So is
I love.
because it sounds like you're still going to do top down. If you're just saying, I'm giving it to the trustees
Well,
or the
yeah,
administrators.
the visualizations you saw there, Keith was showing you a typical teacher account. So the visuals really are consistent all the way through the levels in terms of teacher or administrator. It's just a matter of who you can see the data about. So if I'm a teacher, I'm only going to see data on the kids that are rostered for me. At the admin level, I've got a more global view of kids across the system. So really, it's pretty consistent, pretty similar all the way through. So, because we do want that information in the hands of the teacher.
Well, thanks, everyone. Yeah, go ahead.
I have a question. So, of course, most of these are self-reports, or teachers are like rating the openness of children in a way, and so. And if a teacher has the problem that he has the feeling it's not working well this year for some reason, maybe he was lazy or so.
Right.
Do you have any possibility to see if someone is trying to cheat the system?
So how so? So give me an example of like what a cheating scenario would be.
In the sense that a teacher wants to show he's a good teacher,
Oh, I see
but he knows that the class is bad performing. He might somehow to
Yeah. Well, so
send
Switch off.
signals.
yeah. So I don't know. But what I would say is because there's so many
we
data
will know
points.
something about that.
Yeah.
There's a study going on right now
Okay,
in
cool.
Chicago Public Schools, looking. Maybe Tim, you want to talk about that a bit?
Well, yeah, we're looking a little bit about that. A study here where we're giving people different incentives to sort of see the effects of the way the students respond and the teachers respond.
Yeah, see the baseline.
But I think some of it also, though, is that districts and the schools are giving assessments for the same assessment.
Well, I guess
for
my
a bunch
point
of
is
classrooms.
There's so many different types of data that they could game maybe that kids are behaving well, but it wouldn't affect like some other test or
It's
some
harder
other.
to game some of the other data points. And the nice thing is, because you can see them all in the same system, and a lot of times at the same time, the question then becomes, are all the data points telling the same story? If they're not, then the question becomes, well, why not? Well, let's have that conversation. So it gives you that starter for that conversation that in the past was really hard to get to because you're going to so many different places.
I think this was not a critique on the system, it was more a
No,
general
it's
critique.
fun.
If you set a benchmark, for example, I want that the children increase their socioeconomic skills by,
Right.
in whatever metric, 10%, no matter where the system looks, if it's just easy like clicking, you can game
Yeah.
the system.
Yeah.
But this is not a problem
Yeah,
of
no.
your platform, it's more a problem of
Humanity.
yeah, I'm looking forward for tips and
Yes, sir.
results.
I'm afraid of what question you're going to ask. I see your hand up because every question you ask, I'm sitting there like I don't know. Tanya, what does that mean?
I don't want to.
Oh, God, you're joking. I'm joking. Come
You have to
on.
learn to keep.
Come on. Let's hear it.
Okay, so, I mean, you're assuming you're helping the teacher, right?
Mhm.
And from how you motivated it, I think it makes a lot of sense. They're bombarded by some, seemingly useless, sometimes useful kind of information. You kind of wrap it all up and then present it in a neat format, right? But isn't there a danger that actually increases the problem to some extent? So here's one potential reason. We're showing these pie charts, right? And as a human, I would now take all of these pie charts as equally important, right?
For sure.
When in fact, if I was bombarded for good or bad reasons, it's just a question, right? I might have neglected much of it. Right? Now you bring it up, you integrate it. But every single step of aggregation is problematic, right? Because it's not taking into account reliability of information, for example, of how important it is, right? And in some sense, it is not as innocent as you present it in being an objective reducer of complexity, right? In this reducing complexity, there's a lot of information and some hidden assumptions and levels of aggregation, etc., which one should be, very careful about.
Yeah, I mean, I guess my response would be that we are not.
Data could lie.
Well, I guess what my response would be is what I think what's important is one of the things you said is how we represent the data. So like every pie chart's the same. Does that mean that everything is equally of the same value? So that I completely hear. As far as making the problem worse, for us right now, there's a need in school systems to, I would argue that the chaos that we are helping stop is more valuable than I guess the chaos that we would be creating.
I actually have two comments. One is that we're not done yet, but you're going to be able to build your own data wall, so that the teacher can choose the things
that are important, right?
They want to track, which
Yeah, but the pie chart's for the administrator. It's not for the individual.
Yeah,
teachers.
well, you'll have pie charts. We'll let them look at different ways. But then, as you said, maybe the data lies. What's interesting, Keith and I were at Harvard talking to their education people, and the guy there who was in charge of big data from the annual tests basically told us those things are so dangerous because there's not enough data points that you should ignore them. They can be very, very dangerous. So that is what you have today, and we're saying, that's one data point amongst many. So we're actually, I think, giving them much more information to at least help them in fulfilling their job.
All I'm saying is the way you present it is suggestive.
Yeah,
and it has to.
It creates a new problem. It does, but it's solving another one. So.
All I'm saying is there's a trade-off. There's a potential.
Right, for sure.
And I think one should probably keep it. So really testing how people perceive that, framing matters a lot.
Yeah.
We know that, presenting things differently has big effects on how people perceive stuff. There's semi-objectiveness in some of these charts, right? Some of the data is just totally unreliable, but the moment that you put it into nice charts, and,
it looks it's authentic.
Right. I see. Yep, for sure. Well, that's why we're here. I mean, for that type of feedback and.
You actually could categorize or suggest a categorization that some of the more hard tested data could be presented in the reliability section, and the soft skills self-rated more.
Right.
But remember, some of this is already determined by other people. So all these testing agencies have their own scale that we're using their scale. It's not like we're creating a new scale. The schools decide if they're on a point basis, a grade basis, or a standards basis. And if it's a point basis, we let them determine what's an A, B, C, D. We don't, the administrator determines the scales that we're using, or the testing agency does.
There's a high degree of local decision making at the district level that they determine what recognitions do they want to track, what are the different components that they want to look at, and what's most important for them in their local context, because from one district to another that can be very different.
I think one of the points I hear being made, and coming from ETS, one of the things as a psychometrician, one of the things that's always been frustrating is how people take test scores and they don't understand the uncertainty in it.
Mm-hmm.
They take them as fact, and it's actually a service you guys could do to expose some of that uncertainty and to let people know that variance happens. Yeah.
Really,
I really worry though about how literally people take these things.
I've seen it. Yep.
But I would just add, right, that there are a lot of different districts with more or less level of intellectual curiosity, and therefore opportunities, I think, for experimentation.
Yeah, sure.
And that's it's hard to sort of delineate all of those, but they're there, and I think it really does create. And I think the ideas that were here really should be brought and will be.
Oh, yeah, they were great. I mean,
You
a
know,
lot
so,
of.
so honestly, I think this is very much in flux. It's not like anything's, I mean, you've got basic framework, but there's
Yes.
still a lot. That's
There's still a
why
lot in development.
you're here, I guess, at the birth, more or less, or close to the birth.
That's true.